for listening to Uncle Sam's Soccer Podcast, keeping you up to date with the latest in American soccer. And don't forget to subscribe.
Hello everyone and welcome to this edition of Uncle Sam's Soccer Podcast. I'm your host Steven Jodarand. Joining me as always are Jake Latroba and Armand Kafai. On this week's episode of Uncle Sam's Soccer Pod, we have no technical issues, so we react to Clemente Lisi's interview from last week. We give you our reaction like some of you requested. He's a writer for USSoccerPlayers.com and called in to explain the backside story to why the San Jose Earthquakes relocated to Houston and how that compares in contrast to the situation we are seeing in Columbus. Go listen to the interview before this episode. It makes a lot more sense. Writer and podcaster at SockTakes.com, Nipun Chopra, joins us to break down USL's rebrand and his interview request with Carlos Cordeiro. Lastly, we discuss reports of getting rid of the third designated player slot in MLS. Follow us on Twitter, UncSamSoccerPod. We always enjoy your feedback and comments, so continue to send them in. Don't forget, you can find the show on any major podcast platform, so go ahead and hit the subscription button, wherever that may be, and give us a 5-star review. Now, let's get to today's show. How we doing, guys?
Pretty swell.
We're doing well. We're doing well so far.
We're doing well. Yeah, not bad.
Not bad. All right.
How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you, Jake. Thank you for asking that. I've made
no one
sure...
ever asked you how you're doing.
I know it's. I don't know what it is. It's must be pick on the foreign guy or something like that. You know.
What the heck?
Which one? Aren't you both the foreign?
Fair enough. Before we even get started, I got to call out Armand Kafai. Armand, do you feel silly for calling out Wayne Rooney's decision to come to MLS and DC United's decision to sign Wayne Rooney? Do you feel silly?
Yeah, it was a welcome surprise. I mean, what can I say? He definitely outplayed, and he also rejuvenated that DC fan base and also DC United as a whole on the field as well. And I'm sure Jake would agree, though, that I wouldn't mind that money being spent on a person like a Pity Martinez.
I've already submitted my apology letter, so I have no comment at this time.
Hey, they have to get, I think, 9 points from remaining 12 to make the playoffs. That's all they need to get.
So I'm gonna be that guy. I gotta call out Jake and Steven now. Guys, how do you feel about your boy Brad Friedel? Shutting up all the haters. Mid-season award.
Hey, we gave him a mid-season reward for the previous
season. I'll take the apology
season.
letter now.
There's no apology letter.
Apologize.
Hey, man, those the full season awards. So at the time, at the midway point, they were fine. They were doing better than anyone had expected.
And by
the way,
as
the season's coming to an end, not so good. So that's all I got.
I'm with Jake and Armand. We took Brad Friedel's record and put it into context. You said Wayne Rooney was going to suck. You didn't know what he was going to do. You can't get somebody in trouble for something they never did.
Suck. Play the clip. Play the clip where I said that.
Yeah, Armand, you said he sucked. What's going on, Armand?
Shut up, Jake. Play the clip. Roll the clip.
I don't have the clip. I'm not gonna find the clip.
Okay, there we go.
Armand never said that he sucked. You never said, but you questioned the signing.
He never said it. He never said it on the mic, but maybe he said it off the mic. Who can really be sure?
Well, let's go under the hood. Let's get a review. Let's check VAR.
Let's go to the Uncle Sam VAR review. Secondly, the Premier League top 5 is divided by 2 points. City, Chelsea, Liverpool, Arsenal, Tottenham. Guys, the fact that the Premier League is divided by 2 points here at the top 5, is this a good or bad thing for MLS? Because let me tell you, this has, my Euro snobness has come out really strong in recent weeks, and this European calendar season has been fantastic to watch, to the point where, MLS, it's like I have to put time aside to watch it. This stuff comes a lot more natural to watch.
Unless you're going to watch it, if you're going to like Premier League, you're going to watch it. But I don't see a correlation between the two.
I'm gonna have to go and say that this probably hurts MLS a little bit, because if the Premier League is more interesting, I mean, my attention. I'm gonna be more excited to watch Premier League matches than MLS matches now.
Well, you should be. I mean,
I should be. I mean, Minnesota.
I mean, no one's saying like you should be more excited to watch MLS. I'm just saying if you're gonna watch MLS, you're gonna watch MLS. If you're gonna watch Premier League, you're gonna watch Premier League. There's no. I mean, you're gonna do it regardless. There's no correlation between the two.
Right.
Although I will say, you do start realizing the drop off between the two leagues, and it's obviously big, and it's one thing I've been noticing a lot of is the drop off between the two leagues.
I clearly there's a quality gap, but that's expected. I think the biggest issue, at least watching on television, is just the ambiance that you get from NBC on of a Premier League game, even if it's Fulham versus Bournemouth. It's a lot different than FC Dallas versus DC United, right? Like you get a different vibe.
It's also the atmosphere, man. It's also atmosphere. It's like why you watch an Atlantic. I mean that combination of those two make for an entertaining television broadcast. I mean, I think I was watching FC Dallas Columbus. I mean, a couple weeks ago, awful game, absolutely awful game. I mean, the Portland FC Dallas game last week, it was awful as well on the field, but off the field atmosphere of Portland made it really fun. But that FC Dallas Columbus game in Frisco was absolutely awful to watch. Their atmosphere was kind of lacking, and also just the play itself. So I mean, I think the combination of the two definitely plays a big part in how a match is more entertaining.
Anyway, let's talk about Clement Lisi's interview. We didn't give our reaction to it. Armand, could you repeat for the listeners what was the main point on why the Earthquakes relocated to Houston?
So I'm gonna give you a TLDR. Too long didn't read. Basically, what's so funny about that? It's a terminology we use nowadays. Us millennials. No. Basically, the San Jose Earthquakes needed to move out of necessity in order to attract, I think, a new investor who wanted to buy the Earthquakes. Their situation wasn't that good at Spartan Stadium. And Lisi argued in his interview, which I highly suggest you go listen to, that Precourt's move is more of greed and wanting to maximize profits compared to necessity.
So, guys, how do we react to this? Let's start with Jake, because Jake, you've had strong comments before, and and this week's hate mail will not be directed at Jake Wetruba. It will be directed at Armand Kafai. But Jake, give us your reactions.
I don't know. I guess you can splice it any way you want to. At the end of the day, it's just to me it just sounds like San Jose wasn't making money at the time, and they didn't want to. I don't know. They're just Columbus Crew aren't making enough money, or aren't making the kind of money that Anthony Precourt thinks that they're capable of making. And to me, it sounded like that the San Jose Earthquake at the time were not making profits, so the league up and moved them to Houston. Is that not this basically the same thing?
I don't know.
I don't know, man. I mean, I to be honest, I mean, I guess it's not really the same situation, but it's tough, I think, overall to compare it to, because
what is he
in the scheme of things?
What does he exactly say in the pod?
I think it was like it's a big difference between the two. It's like in terms of the years, that it's like an eternity. I think that's what it was between 06 and 07 or 05 06 MLS and 2017 2018 MLS, and I think at this point for the league to grow, I think we talk about it actually a little bit later. There's gonna be, I think, some movement, and in terms of ownership and whatnot, because the league needs to take that next step in growth. But I don't know if it should come at the expense of Columbus.
Yeah, it's just hard to understand the comparison, just because MLS is in such a different situation now than it was then. And it's not apples and oranges because I think at the end of the day, it's about the dollar sign, and that's why the clubs were relocated. It's all about the dollar sign, particularly in American sports. We are consumers. Yeah, as much as we are fans in Europe, fans are different, particularly in Germany where you have the 50+1 rule. So here in America, we're consumers, and we ultimately pay to see the product on the field. The ownership gets complete control. I mean, Jake, you know personally up in Minnesota, they thought they were going to move the Vikings if they weren't going to get money for a stadium. What did that have to do with? Money. It all comes down to money. In American sports, players are not obligated to one specific club, to one specific franchise. All they care about the money. The ownerships, all they care about is the money. The league as a whole, all they care about is money. This all comes down to money. And if people think, and this is my personal opinion, if you think Anthony Precourt is the only one discussing this, no, you're wrong. This is MLS as a whole. They see the dollar signs just as Anthony Precourt does, or they believe the dollar signs are in Austin. And if this is a benefit for Anthony Precourt, you betcha Garber and MLS will be, well, is this a benefit for the league as well? And if it's so, then they could probably get more on board with it. That's how expansion fees go. That's why they're so high. That's why they look at it and be like, what's the money? How are we going to make money off of this expansion slot?
No, Steven, you're I think you hit the nail on the head. Is that this all just comes down to the dollar signs. This is all about the Benjamins. This is, MLS just trying to secure the bag.
Secure the bag. Yeah, it's all about the money, guys. I mean,
so Armand, you're in agreement that it's about just the money.
Yes, it is. I mean, of course, it's there's no necessity for the crew to move. Anthony Precourt deems that he thinks that he'll make more profits elsewhere, and that's why he wants to move. There's nothing that can genuinely change his mind.
Listeners, go back and listen to the interview. Highly recommend it. It puts you a lot of context. Very fascinating, very interesting. We gave you our thoughts. Hate mail at Armand Kafai this week, not at Jake Watrova. Trying to give him a little bit of a breather. Anyway, listeners, up next, Nipun Chopra on USL's rebrand and his inquiry with Carlos Cordeiro. Joining us right now is Nipun Chopra. You can follow him on the Twitter machine at Nipun Chopra7. He's a writer, podcaster at soccertakes.com, and we have to include he's also a PhD, or has a PhD. Nipun, how's it going? Thanks for joining us this afternoon.
I'm good. Absolute pleasure to join you, gentlemen. It's a good afternoon here in Indianapolis. I ran 9 miles, so after we're done chatting, I'm going to take a long nap.
I know
9 miles? Like that's impressive. I mean,
I'm training for a half marathon. That's the only reason.
There you go.
Yeah.
I don't think me, Jake, or Steven have run like 9 miles combined in the last.
I can't even run a block. So,
Armand, I will disagree with you. I have ran 9 miles in the last week. So,
okay,
nice.
Big shot.
Yeah. Anyway, let's talk about USL's rebrand. It's about today's October 7th, or the recording of the show is October 7th. So about a week and a half ago, USL rebrands itself into, I guess, a new face for U.S. soccer from USLsoccer.com. It's one central brand, 3 leagues, USL Championship, which is the pinnacle of the competition, USL League One, the foundation of professional soccer, and USL League 2, a path to pro. Now, there are a lot of ways we can go with this, Nipun, but from the perspective of USL, why do you think they did this, and why now?
I think they did this because they truly are in a new era of their existence. And what I mean by that is, if you look at the history of lower division soccer, there are a couple of critical points. The first one was about 2009-2010, when the NASL broke off from the USL. And from 2010 to 2011 to 2015, NASL truly was the was far ahead of USL in most metrics. starting 2015, 2016, that started to change with the incoming teams like Louisville City and FC Cincinnati. The USL really started to take control of critical markets. By 2016, they were about at par, and starting, I'd say, 2017, and definitely 2018, USL is currently the biggest game in town outside of MLS. And I think they recognized that, and they wanted to make sure that it was apparent to people that didn't know all the history of USL, of lower division soccer. So from their perspective, rebranding as USL Championship and USL League One and League Two gives them the kind of recognition that I think they feel that they deserve.
Nipun, we mentioned it, League One, League Two, Championship, but why the same league names as we see in England and the United Kingdom? One of the things that we talked about off the mic was that I was kind of like, I'm not sure if I would have really gone with USL Championship, League One, or League Two if I were to rebrand the league. Why do you think the league decided to go that route in terms of naming?
Yeah, there's no definitive answer to this. I think there are multiple contributory factors. I think the biggest one is Jake Edwards is obviously an outcome of the English, not the Premier League, but the FA system. So I think it's something that he recognizes. I think that's one reason, Jake Edwards being English. Another reason is that the USL, ultimately any rebrand is really to increase awareness. And I think what USL is, I don't know this for a fact, but I'm hypothesizing that USL wanted to rebrand to something that people would recognize, soccer people would recognize. And even though there is some fair pushback in terms of why you just plagiarizing an idea, I think overall, if you're most expats, or I should say, most people who love soccer in America aren't really buying into MLS USL, and perhaps by rebranding to something that regular passionate soccer fans recognize, which is the Premier League setup, perhaps you kind of raise awareness of the brand. That's possibly why they did that.
Nipun, many have suggested this rebrand opens the door for promotion relegation. Even USL had a FAQ about this where they say, currently the United Soccer League is focused on establishing a successful new third division in USL League One to help fill out the professional US soccer structure, which is a necessary precursor to any implementation of promotion and relegation. That said, the new structure does lend itself well to some form of promotion and relegation in the future. Does this put pressure on MLS?
No. Next question.
Yes.
It does not. Because, look, if you look at where MLS is right now, it is so far ahead of USL that it doesn't really bring. I genuinely don't think USL is a significant enough entity to trouble MLS. Any team that does well in USL or any lower division, MLS can come in and snatch them up immediately. I don't think there is a way in hell that USL ever competes with MLS. At the same time, just forget this narrative. Just look at the numbers. You're talking about teams that are evaluated about 150 to 170 million in MLS. In USL, currently the franchise fee is 7 million starting this year, and then at USL D3 it is 500,000. I think we're talking about orders of magnitude difference, and I don't think whether ProRel comes in or whether this comes in or that comes in, USL becomes a something that MLS worries about in terms of a competitor.
And do you think that MLS would ever, or USL would ever try to even compete with MLS, or it isn't mainly their goal to, I think, continue this partnership that they have with the top division?
Yeah, I think it's the latter. Every conversation I've had with USL owners, USL GMs, people in the USL office, none of them have ever intimated to me that they plan on turning heel, to use a wrestling analogy, on MLS. I think that's something that a lot of us fantasize about because we want to see another competitor for MLS. But I don't think it'll be USL The ties are too strong. The partnership is too strong. I don't see that happening.
And going forward, overall with this new rebrand, do you personally think this is a good idea and a good direction for U.S. soccer as a whole?
I think I'll take those questions separately. I think it's a good idea, just because it raises brand awareness. People are talking about it for the good or the bad. I think it's good for USL to establish itself, which is what it's trying to do. So I think in general for USL, it's good. US soccer, I don't know if it moves the needle one way or the other, to be honest. I think it's a status quo situation for US soccer as things stand. Now, if something like promotion relegation comes in, that does in fact change the equation. But just the rebrand itself, I don't think it moves the needle either way for US soccer at large.
Nipun, I want to shift gears here towards your Twitter thread from about a week and a half ago, where you were explaining you made multiple attempts to ask U.S. soccer or to sit down and ask a few questions with U.S. soccer president Carlos Cordeiro in regards to division sanctioning and lower division soccer. Reading through the Twitter thread, it seemed like it was a little difficult to get in touch with him. What were your impressions of U.S. soccer after that experience?
First of all, thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk about this, because this is the first time I'm talking about it since that Twitter thread. I think overall my experience with U.S. soccer has been a positive one. I'd say 8 times out of 10 when I've reached out to them for an answer, they've given it to me. It might not be the answer that I was hoping for, but at least they've reached back to me, which is a higher, by the way, which is a higher percentage. 80% response rate is much higher than I get from USL, which is probably like 10% respond rate from USL. So I appreciate US Soccer's PR responding to journalist questions. But I was very disappointed with how all of this played out, because this US Soccer representative, who I've chosen not to identify, kept basically suggesting to me that the interview would happen, and eventually, when I spoke to him, he made it very clear that he would get answers from Carlos, and he would get them pretty quickly, and I would have the opportunity to ask follow-up questions because I had been so patient and because I was willing to write out the questions. And none of that happened, and I think it's pretty indicative that so here's what I think. The easy explanation is that Carlos is truly busy enough that he doesn't have time to answer these questions. I don't think that's true. The second explanation is that he doesn't know enough about this stuff. And that is what troubles me. That's truly what troubles me. That is the explanation that troubles me, knowing that the U.S. soccer president isn't able to articulate basic questions. Look, I wasn't asking him what formation is FC Cincinnati playing. I don't expect him to know that. Of course, I don't expect him to know details about individual teams. But overarching questions about the status of lower division soccer, 100% should be questions that the president of U.S. soccer should be able to answer. And for the PR person to tell me he didn't think Carlos was the best person to answer these questions, I think it's pretty indicative.
And just for our listeners, I just want to give some of the questions that Nipun actually asked Carlos. One of them was, what, in your opinion, are some bigger challenges for lower division soccer in the United States? And another one was, the lower divisions of U.S. soccer, particularly USL, have seen unprecedented growth in the last few years. What role has USSF played in that success? So, I mean, like you said, it wasn't anything that was, hard, bizarre, crazy. I thought they were very fair answers. I think very, very questions I think you'd expect the USSF president to answer. And actually, that led right into my question. Yeah, I think you kind of answered it. Is it a bit alarming that they said, hey, he's not the right guy to answer these questions?
I think it is. I really do think it is. People who are defending Carlos or defended Carlos in my mentions push back on me saying, well, it could simply be that there's lawsuits and there's this and there's that involved, and that's the reason he's not the best person to answer them. And sure, even if I'm stretching, maybe one of those questions, particularly the promotion relegation one, is something that Carlos cannot answer, given that there's a CAS filing currently in the mix. Sure, I can buy that. And to be honest, that was a question I was, as I said in my Twitter thread, it was a question I wasn't really expecting an answer to. It's just one of those, I kind of have to ask this question things. So sure, he could have said no comment on a couple of those questions, but to suggest that all 10 questions, or I forget if the 10 or 9 questions were things that would, the reason he couldn't answer them was because of litigation, I think is demonstrably false. And I think it is intellectually dishonest. So I don't buy the idea that the reason he couldn't answer them is because of all these lawsuits. I think the reason he couldn't answer them were either he truly couldn't, or his PR folk, or US's PR folk didn't think he could.
So where do you see this going forward? Are you going to reach back out to USSF in the coming months, or are you going to try again? What's your next step of action here?
To be perfectly honest with you, I haven't thought of a next step of action. I kind of assumed that since I put this out there, and if you guys see the dates, it's pretty clear that I spent a lot of time kind of dealing with this, and I didn't include every single communication either. I spent a lot of time dealing with this, and I kind of came to a point where I said, if I don't say something now, this is just going to continue. So my best guess is that this interview is dead, that it's not going to happen, especially now that I've put them on blast. Will I reach out to them in the future? I'm sure that I will, but I don't expect to get an interview with Carlos Cordeiro.
We're closing in on the 1-year anniversary of the U.S. men's national team failure to qualify for the World Cup this past summer. Now, there was a lot of outrage. We changed USSF president. There was the election. We're going through, I guess, the GM role. They're looking at coaches right now. But do you think USSF has done enough to reflect the anger that U.S. soccer fans have had towards the entire structure of U.S. soccer?
Definitely not. Well, I can say that pretty unequivocally. I think there are very few people who are happy with USSF right now. Regardless of what level you're looking at, whether it's USL or MLS or USSF, I think people are pretty frustrated with how things have moved. I mean, people who are regularly pretty wary of criticizing USSF have been very critical. People like Taylor Twellman, people like Grant Wall, people like Lexi Lawless, who try to be measured or, however you want to describe it, have been very critical openly of USSF, and rightfully so, because USSF, given how bad October 10, 2017 was, the glacial pace with which USSF has moved is alarming to any neutral observer. And I 100% don't think that they have done stuff correctly and quickly enough.
What do you make of the coaching situation, Nipun? It seems like we're finally getting interviews. I guess yay. I feel like I feel like, especially for a potential MLS coach, which isn't a bad thing. I feel like waiting a year, at least in my opinion, is a little too long.
Yeah. I think it has been too long, especially. I guess there are two ways to look at it. No games have been played that have any sort of real impact. But at the same time, as I think that was someone on SiriusXM was saying, these games should have been an opportunity for a new coach to bed himself or herself into the team. And I think instead, the new coach, whoever it is, head coach, whoever it is, comes in and will have to build everything ahead of Gold Cup, ahead of all these upcoming tournaments, and of course ahead of World Cup qualifying. So in some ways, the really frustrating thing, guys, is that this whole year has been a waste. It has been a waste in terms of preparedness for the U.S. men's national team. I'm not super excited about how things have been handled. I'm curious to see who gets hired, and it'll be fun next summer when there are 3 big tournaments happening at the same time. But it is still very frustrating.
Nipun, one final question here for you. You recently wrote an article on Sock Takes looking into the survival rate of NPSL clubs over the last 15 or so years. The average lifespan of a club at NPSL, you wrote, is 3.3 years. Is there anything that U.S. Soccer can do to curb those numbers and help make NPSL and even USL more sustainable?
Yeah, so the average is 3.3, but the median level is 2 years. And I think, not to get deep into statistics, but I think in this particular case, the median is a better indicator of what a new club might expect. So in other words, if you guys decide to sign up an NPSL team in 2019, the statistics suggest that your club will be alive for 2 years. I think that is very, very depressing. What can USSF do? I have many, many, many ideas of what USSF could do. But I think the central idea, which I think would most directly impact NPSL, USL, PDL, NISA, NPSL Pro, etc., is for USSF to be more interventionalist. And what I mean by that is to prevent leagues from parasitizing each other and stealing teams off of each other and enticing owners and enticing front office staff to come over to one side or the other. I think USSF needs to be able to intervene on these situations more. However, USSF is simply a sanctioning body and has no other roles in terms of leagues. And I think if USSF were to change that, it would not get rid of all the problems. There are a lot of problems, but it would help about 20 to 25%, which when you're talking about a survival rate of 2 years is a significant thing.
Well, Nipun, thank you so much for joining us today. We do have a shameless plug, so go ahead, please plug your podcast where we can find your work on the Twitter machine once again, and anything else you'd like to plug away.
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed the questions. My work can be found at socktakes.com. You can find me on Twitter at Nipun Chopra 7 and Socktakes at Socktakes on Twitter.
Awesome. Thanks again.
Thank you so much.
Big shout out and thank you to Nipun for joining us. Jake and Armand, real interesting interview. A lot of stuff was said. Any reactions or thoughts to follow up on before we move along here?
I mean, I agree with Nipun. It's pretty alarming that the newly elected president of the U.S. Soccer Federation that, apparently is supposed to know more than Sunil Gulati can't answer the questions about lower level soccer. Shows how much they care. Just saying.
Yeah, it's pretty alarming that they're pretty just general questions that he was being asked. Like Nipun said, it wasn't like he was asking what Indy 11 starting 11 is on a given week, or what formation does FC Cincinnati play, or at USSF deemed Carlos Cordeiro not the man to be asking these questions to is that's very alarming.
No, you're right. It's very alarming. Anyway, Armand, take it away. You wanted to talk about this more so than anybody else on the show. So
I'm upset.
Why's that?
I'm upset because according to Sam Stejskal, we actually have on the show a few times, the league is tossing around the idea of eliminating the third DP player spot or putting a hard cap on it. And what they would like to do, and it's supposed to happen in 2020, was to increase TAM instead and get a DP spot. And I'm upset, guys. I think the league is holding itself back. The third DP role has played a massive part in team success, but we've seen a recent shift in parity, I'd say. I think teams in the league that don't want to spend as much are starting to see it, and we're starting to see more of that European-esque league where, the teams that spend more are obviously going to get more wins, and the teams that don't aren't. I think the older owners, like the MLS 1.0s, are realizing this and say, whoa, we need to slow this down. We don't want to spend as much money. Why not get rid of that third DP spot and just spread it, and we'll just make it seem like it's gonna be worth more in TAM. I can't agree with this at all. I'm sure it's Seattle Sounders. They're gonna be a little pissed. I mean, we heard the rumor of Atlanta United wanting to spend $25 million on on Pity Martinez from Boca or from River Plate. I'm sorry, not Boca. I'll get yelled at for that. I mean, guys, what do y'all think?
Armand, I'm gonna play devil's advocate with you.
Oh
here.
no, don't do this.
Why?
Okay, I'm just kidding. Do it.
I'm gonna do it. Okay. We're gonna go to CONCACAF Champions League. All right. So when MLS teams play Liga MX teams, what are some of the things people say about the differences between the two?
I know where you're going with this. I know
that the middle tier quality isn't there for MLS like it is for Liga MX. So if you were to theoretically increase the amount of TAM that teams can spend, which is, basically TAM is used to kind of acquire those middle tier, those depth players, if you will, for MLS sides. Doesn't that kind of raise the water level of the league a little bit?
So let me hit you with this counterattack. Get it? On the counterattack. Why don't they just keep the third DP spot and just increase TAM?
You were also right. I was thinking the same thing too. I don't understand why. Because think about it. Like, you don't need, if you're a club, you don't need to have a DP if you don't want to have a DP. You know what I mean?
Exactly. I'm telling you. Sorry to interrupt, Jake. I'm telling you, it's the MLS 1.0s. The ones that just don't want to spend money. I feel like that are. I'm assuming pushing the move. I don't think it's Arthur Blank. I think Arthur Blank's like, hell no. I want to produce the best product possible, and I'm gonna spend as very much money as I can. I think Seattle would be against it too. I'd probably argue that Portland would be against it too. I feel like it's the owners on the lower level of the spectrum that are saying, let's get rid of this third DP spot, but they're using the excuse of we want to strengthen the middle of the core. I think they're scared that the parity is going to start going. It's the right word.
You're going to have the
haves and the have-nots.
Yeah, or the wills and will-nots in this case, because they're not. You have owners that aren't willing to spend money. I mean, I don't know. I can see it on both sides. I mean, even if there's a third DP, there's going to be teams who aren't going to spend the money. And I mean, theoretically, you could argue that if you get rid of the second DP, well, now teams have this extra influx of TAM. So now all of a sudden we're going to spend all this extra TAM money to buy down some of these DPs and all this stuff. And I mean,
Wait. Wouldn't it be smart if you're a 1.0 an owner who doesn't want to spend money? There's no relegation, so who cares? Don't spend the money on your squad. And secondly, isn't it better for your league product to have 3 DPs so you can have 3 stars, more marketing ability?
I mean, you'd think that.
I would also argue if you're an MLS 1.0 owner and if you've been in there since like the Crafts and if the Hunts, why aren't you just selling then? If you don't want to spend the money, then get out. Your investment has gone up 30 times its worth than when you bought into it. So why not get out of it? I can see what Arthur Blank's doing. Arthur Blank sees that I bought in for $150 million, but if I make Atlanta United really bleeping good in MLS, I can also raise my investment too.
The thing is, I think with that is, I've said this multiple times on and off the mic, I don't think a lot of the owners that are in MLS right now would buy into the league at an expansion rate of let's say 75 million. I don't think they would.
Wait. The expansion rate is 150 million.
Exactly, and I'm lowering it down.
So you're saying that owners wouldn't buy into 2018 MLS right now for 75 mil.
Yeah.
What makes you think that? What makes you think that? Because
I don't see that.
I don't see your logic behind that either. I mean, what's 75 million to some of these NFL owners?
I don't think they'd even look towards MLS's way. Especially remember the initial investment for these guys. MLS, it was just kind of a little investment in for a potential league to grow. I think 75 million, like you said, it's not a lot for these guys. But I think now that they're in it, look, I know Steven's going to defend the Crafts until, the cows come home. But their product on the field is at best. I know y'all gave Friedel that midseason award for the, Yeah, shut up, haters. But
yeah, that's
they're looking
gone.
pretty terrible.
That's
They were
gone.
good. They're
looking pretty terrible right
in
now.
like May or June whenever we did that. They were looking fine then.
They're looking pretty terrible now. And look at the Hunts. They're slowly increasing their investment, but I mean, not really. If you look at it in the grand scheme of things, a lot of teams just don't really keep up with how the spending is. I think if they looked at it, I don't think they would buy in at this point. I know it sounds a little crazy because I mean MLS is growing and growing, and I mean, well, who wouldn't make a $75 million investment and make it into even more? But I just don't see it, guys. There's some owners that I think are just okay. We got it in for like $2-3 million, and now we're just gonna ride the ship until it just keeps going and going.
This week's edition of Uncle Sam's Soccer Podcast, hate mail at Armand Kafai.
I don't care. Hate on me.
Thank God, finally.
I don't care. Some of the investment these teams make is ridiculous. They might say counterpoint. What about Orlando City and let's say Minnesota United? Minnesota United, I think, is a consensus. It's a soft launch. They're waiting for that stadium to open. Come on. We all know this. Like my boy Jake is upset. That's why they're giving Heath and Lagos some extra, a leash because they're waiting for how it's gonna look in 2019 with that. By the way, I'll ask coming after this, Jake. They're waiting for Allianz Field to open up. If you look at investment, the players they fit have been absolutely awful. Colorado, what are they doing?
But the thing is, Armand, for the sake of the podcast and for clarity for our listeners, you're just speculating. It's not like somebody's tipped you and said owners wouldn't buy it.
Oh yeah, I'm speculating. Speculating.
This is pure speculation, but I think it's an interesting point to talk about because a lot of people look at MLS. A lot of players in Europe look at MLS as this glamour type of thing. I'm surprised, these owners don't take it a little bit more seriously because you invest the money, people will turn out for the names. I mean, 32,000 showed up for Ibrahimovic in New England. I don't think Ibra even played because it was a turf, and this was in the middle of summer.
And look at Atlanta and what they've done. And people keep saying, but Atlanta has an NFL backing, blah, or Arthur Blank's wealth, blah, 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 blah. Well, MLS should be attracting more of those owners because what Arthur Blank's done has been phenomenal. The fact that they're $1 million, this is not normal for MLS from the history we've seen. This isn't a normal trend of spending at all, yet Arthur Blank makes it's the new normal. It's normal for them to spend that much money. It's normal for them to invest that much. It's normal for Atlanta to average 40,000. Guys, week in, week out, they average 40,000. I don't think we emphasize that enough. That is more than every other league, every other team in the league outside of Seattle sometimes.
Highlighting a good problem here with MLS. Instead of looking at what Arthur Blank is doing in Atlanta and saying, look at this guy is getting 40, 45, sometimes 70,000 people into a stadium to watch an MLS match. Instead of catering to that, instead of saying what can we do to have other teams in our league experience that kind of success, MLS is going to cater to the Stan Kroenkes of the world, the Bob Crafts of the world, the Lamar Hunts or whatever the Hunt is owning.
Dan
Hunt, thank you. We're gonna cater to those owners who don't want to spend money, like the Colorado Rapids, not have asses in seats and not spending any money and just being crappy soccer teams.
So I'm gonna raise a question for you guys because I've been thinking about it a little bit and I was actually kind of not tipped off, but I read a Twitter comment and I was like, this is actually really interesting. Because remember, I know you guys have heard how vocal I was against Detroit with that Ford Field setup. But if they had that NFL-esque backing, but you had to see them play on Ford Field, would you guys be okay with, let's say if Detroit was spending like an Arthur Blank, would you guys be okay with Detroit entering the league?
The Fords aren't good owners, though. I mean, look at the Detroit Lions; they've been god-awful.
I'm saying as a hypothetical.
I mean, yeah, if that's what it's going to be, is that they're gonna put 30 to 40,000 people on a given game day into Ford Field for a MLS match. That's fine, but I look at what the Fords have done in the NFL with the Detroit Lions, and I think it's night and day to what Arthur Blank has done with the Falcons.
I think the biggest issue with the clubs that have it's easy to point out to the owners that have soccer specific stadiums as being cheap. I think it's a lot harder when they don't have soccer-specific stadiums. And that, I wonder, especially with the Crafts, I know Armand's going to, call me a fanboy here. Until the Revolution get a stadium, what is the purpose of the Crafts actually spending money into the squad? When they're waiting for the rights of a stadium or the land property in somewhere closer downtown in Boston to build it up. I mean, people have commented.
Well, that's the problem. Well, that's the problem, right?
But they have. I've sent you articles. They have. Now, I don't know what they are doing.
No, not regarding the stadium, but that's a problem. If he's like, what's the point of the Craft spending money? Isn't that a problem?
You're right.
Ask that question.
No, but it is a problem. But think about it. If you're in Kraft's shoes, are people going to show up? What's the difference? There's no consequence. MLS needs to push these owners into getting soccer-specific stadiums, into putting down grass. I agree. Minnesota United will be the litmus test to see what the difference is that difference in will ownership spend more money if they have a soccer-specific stadium and a place to call home. I mean, DC United kind of did. Did they not? I mean, they got a brand new stadium. What'd they do? Splurge. So, will it repeat itself? Who knows? Anyway, listeners, follow us on Twitter, UncSamSoccerPod. Hate mail directed at Almancafai this week.
Send it to me. I don't care. Send it to me. If y'all really don't believe that some owners right now, like that they would buy in at some rate, at the current rate, or even lower, at me. I don't care.
There you go. At Jake Watroba and his Minnesota Vikings. At Steven Jodorant. Like I said, subscribe to the show. Leave us a 5-star review. And only on Uncle Sam Soccer Podcast can we talk about lower division soccer and the mess that USSF is. And also talk about MLS. That's what we do here. Till next week.